All right, check 1, 2. We are on. The mic is working. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Happy Thursday. Wow, I still have a September calendar on my wall. I haven't been busy or anything. Nah. So, welcome to Pondering. I am your host, Joel Rissinger, and the executive pastor at Lifeway Church, as well as all kinds of other hats I wear. And it's great to be with you because probably one of my favorite hats is the Pondering podcast and Pondering radio host. Good morning to Wayne and Susan and Brenda and anyone else I missed. It's great to have you all with us and all of you listening all across the fruited plain and beyond, even in other parts of the world via podcast. We're great to have you. It's great. It is great. We're glad to have you. And I am a professional communicator. I am back in the saddle. Been out sick for a couple days, as many of you know. Had to cancel the show yesterday. The day before we had an abbreviated version. But I'm trying to get back in full swing today. Still not 100%, but we're firing on all cylinders anyway. Sitting upright, taking nourishment, and all that good stuff. And it is good to be with you. In case you're a first-time listener or viewer, we broadcast live on Facebook every weekday morning from 7:30 a.m. till, give or take, about 10 of 8 or so. What we do is we talk about all kinds of stuff. We ponder all things. We believe that we should not check our brains at the door. We believe that our faith should transcend all things. We are willing to talk about anything and really discuss it, and even hear opposing views without being offended. We just ask that if you disagree, you don't do it in a disagreeable manner. Meaning you don't get nasty, don't call names, don't do all that stuff. But we talk about politics, religion, sex, money, kids, you name it. We discuss it. And it's my firm belief that Christianity should not be in a box. And this host, your host, that would be me, comes at things, as I often say, from an unabashedly, unashamedly, unapologetically Christian perspective. And we look at all these things and ask, gee, how now shall we live? How should we think about this? Etc. Every day. Again, 7:30 to 7:50 or so a.m., Monday through Friday. You can contribute by typing into the live stream, as some of you already have. You can do so by calling and leaving a message if we don't answer, although sometimes we are able to answer, at 860-500-7163, 860-500-7163, or you can email us at ponderingradio@gmail.com. Ponderingradio, like one word, at gmail.com. So, hope you're having a good week. It's almost over. We're on the tail end of it now. This is what I call pre-Friday today. It's not really Thursday. Or Friday Eve. That works also. Oh, hey, Rick. Good morning. Welcome. Rick and Cheryl Least from Maysville, Kentucky. I bet it's a lot nicer down there today than it is here. It's not bad. It's just snow and ice, and we got to be careful. And, we didn't do a good job with our driveway this time because yours truly was flat on his back for 2 days. So we had someone come in, but, his equipment broke down. And so our driveway kind of looks like some sort of post-apocalyptic disaster, frankly. I mean, you can drive in it, but you do so at your own risk. Walking in it is even worse. But we can get in and out, and that is good. So, anyway, and now everything's frozen, so you have to have a pickaxe, or dynamite to get out and clear the ice out of there. But anyway, hopefully we won't get in trouble. I have a problem. Let me vent. Can we talk? We talk a little bit? So, my sidewalk in front of my house, we have a lot of frontage on New Britain Avenue and also on Kelvin. We're right on the corner. And the town, when they plow, they do a good job. I'm not complaining about that. But the problem is that the sidewalk, I'm responsible to clear the sidewalk in front of the house. That's the rule for everybody. I get it. But my sidewalk drifts in the angle really close to the street at the corner of Kelvin and New Britain Ave. And therefore, that whole section consistently gets filled with slush and ice when the town comes through with a truck. So I could have it perfect, down to the concrete, just bare, just wonderful. And 5 minutes later, it'll just be overflowing with ice and slush and mush and garbage. And then if I don't get to it, it freezes. And then once it freezes, again, you need the dynamite and the pickaxe. So we have a little bit of a mess out there. Hold on one second. Hello? Somebody knocking on my door? I think my grandkids are here because their power went out last night. So I don't know. The Addie and Bryn are here, so they are popping in to say hi to Bampa because their power went out last night at their house. There's Addie. Say hi to everybody.
Hi.
And then, so they came over here because they had no electricity and no lights and heat and all that fun stuff. So they slept over. Right, Bryn?
Yeah.
You want to say hi to people? No? You don't? Okay. They have their school shirts on. They're getting ready to head out the door pretty quick. So, yes, the globe. You can play with that. So, yeah, so I had, that's part of the reason I got going a little late this morning. You know, I had to read a couple books. Bampa stuff. You know, you gotta read books. And speaking of reading books, shall we pick up where we left off last time? Or actually, two or 3 days ago, because I gave you another little insert day because I wasn't feeling well. Good morning to Linda. Linda's joined us. I promised you we would do some apologetics. No, I'm not apologizing. Nor should you apologize for your faith. Apologetics is the science of being able to give an answer for the hope that lies within. It's being able to explain and take a stand for the Christian faith based on facts, based on truth, based on logic, based on history, based on science, as opposed to going, oh, I don't know, I just believe, you know, because I just always believe. You know, what's true for you is true for you. What's true for me is true for me. I just reached out one day and, oh, I'm a Christian. That's how our world operates right now, and unfortunately that is how some Christians operate, that it's almost like we lined up all the world religions, which some Christians even would argue that they're all the same, which is craziness. The law of non-contradiction that goes back to the time of Plato and Socrates would say that that's a ridiculous, absurd, impossible assertion, to say that things that contradict each other are somehow the same. In other words, that they're both right in some way. So if I say Hartford's north and you say Hartford's south of where I am right now, we can't both be right because we contradict each other. One of us could be right and the other wrong, or both could be wrong, but we can't both be right in some magical way if we contradict each other. So if Buddhism says, or Hinduism says there's millions of gods, and Judaism says there's one, they can't both be right because they contradict each other. You with me? Okay. So being able to explain that kind of stuff is important in our world, because people are swimming in jello. They have nothing to hang on to. And sometimes they legitimately have questions and concerns, and they really want to be informed. And you and I should be able to do it. And I love going to Genesis 1 for that purpose, because Genesis 1 proves the inspiration of the Bible like few other passages. Just so powerful. So I recommend being able to kind of look at this with people and say, hey, you know, how is it possible? Here's the question. How is it possible that Moses, and if you don't accept, excuse me, if you don't accept that Moses wrote it, then some imaginary sheep herder 3,500 years ago, or at least 2,000 years ago, because there were copies of the Septuagint at the time of Christ, right, available. So that was the translation of the Hebrew Old Testament into Greek. We know that exists, so we know that this book of Genesis existed at least 2,000 years ago, but I would argue 3,500 years ago. How did anybody, Moses or anybody, know some of these things? And here's just a few you can point out quickly to somebody that might cause them to go, I should tell you, too, that you kind of have to stay away from the whole argument about, is it 7 literal 24-hour days? Is there a gap between verse 1 and verse 2? All these other little theories. I would just stay away from that. I don't even like to dive into that. I mean, we can. I'm a day-age person, if you want to look up the theory. I believe that each day represents an age of creation. But regardless, I don't even need to go there. I just look at the things that Moses points out and the order in which they happened and ask the question, how did he know that 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago without inspiration, without divine intervention? There is no other record of anyone knowing and understanding these things. In fact, ancient man had some very different, contradictory ideas. So how did Moses know this? And I'll just point out a few, and I would recommend you kind of make a list of these or hang on to them, because It's a great thing to show someone who's questioning the Bible, wonders if it's accurate, wonders if they can trust it, wonders if there's a reason for faith, or faith is just something we choose to believe because we're silly and we need something to believe in, or because it feels good, or just because we were born into it, or again, we went eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a tiger by the toe and picked a world religion, just happened to be Christianity, and there we are. No, there's so much more. So many more valid, logical reasons to ponder. See what I did there? As far as why we believe. And so I'm going to give you those, just a few little examples of the inspiration of the Bible from Genesis 1 here in just a second. Let me catch up on comments. Rick says it's just cold down there, but no snow. Good. I said good morning to Linda. Susie says good morning to my grandbabies. Rick's checking out. Okay. Have a good day. Al Ebling is here. Good to hear you. Hello from Boston. Yeah, you guys got even more snow than we did, didn't you, brother? I'm glad you're doing well, my friend. So, reasons to believe in the inspiration of the Bible from Genesis 1. All right, well, the first thing, we talked already about God is the cause, the first cause, and that intelligent design makes a whole lot more sense than God without a brain, which is what the pinpoint of energy and matter scientists credit for the Big Bang would be. It would be God, because it's self-existent, because it's immortal, eternal, because it is all-powerful, all those things, all those attributes are God-like divine attributes, except they say it had no brain, it just blew up and everything happened from there. We would argue that that makes no sense, that intelligence, creativity, laws require a lawgiver and an intelligent source, etc. But let's move on. So, other reasons beyond what we covered the other day. Verse 2, the earth was without form and void, darkness was on the face of the deep, Spirit of God was hovering over the waters, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. Okay. Without form and void, science believes to have discovered / proven that after the Big Bang, all the chunks of matter in the universe were not round or spherical like they are now, because they had to come into a gravitational rotation in order for that formation, that shape, to occur. So how did Moses, 3,500 years ago, know that the earth, as well as other planets, would be just like big chunks of matter initially? Good guess or divine inspiration? Since no one else at that age, at that time, knew or taught or understood these things until modern science discovered it, how did Moses know? And then it says, God said, let there be light, and bam, there was light. Science now believes that all the stars, etc., ignited well after the Big Bang and after all the matter and energy had dispersed throughout the universe. That there was this sudden, based on gravity and based on gravitational forces, the formation of these planets and stars, etc., started to take place, and the various gases, etc., came together and ignited, and that's when light was born, so to speak. Well, Moses sort of seems to understand that. He didn't understand all the science behind it, but he says it was dark, everything was just hunks of shapeless mess, and then boom, light came, because God said so. How do you know that? Good guess or divine inspiration? You be the judge. God calls the darkness night, calls the light day. Let me move down. Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Let it divide the waters from the water. God made a firmament, verse 7, divide the waters which was under the firmament above the waters, which, etc., etc. So there's a space, a gap of what we would call atmosphere that forms. Which, and by the way, there's water. That the earth is initially molten and liquid on the surface. Science also has, quote, discovered that, unquote, in the last couple centuries. But Moses seems to understand it right here, doesn't he? And so then after this formation starts to occur, the shape starts to come into place, then it begins to separate. Gases begin to separate from water, separating from matter underneath, and there is now atmosphere. Well, again, science agrees with that order of things, and Moses seems to get it, and he gets it in the right order, too. All right, then let's see, calls the firmament heaven or atmosphere, sky, we would call it, same thing. Then he says in verse 9, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together in one place, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. So initially, everything's liquid. Then land appears, apparently in one big chunk, pushing all the water together around it, but being separate from it. Well, in order for that to be true, you would have initially all the continents that we now, as we now know them, together as one big mass, right? And then, after that happens, he says God called the dry land earth, to gather together water he called seas, plural, and saw that it was good. So initially he says the water is in one place, and then he says there are seas, plural, and the land appears first. So water's everywhere, land appears. All the water's around it, but still connected. Then, boom, there are seas. How does that happen? Unless those continents, that landmass, breaks up such that it separates the water into seas, right, or oceans even, as we would refer to some of the larger bodies. That is a continental shift. That would be something, again, that science has discovered and postulated and believed, maybe the last 200 years, that initially the whole Earth was one big landmass that broke up. And if you take a globe like this one that Brittany was playing with earlier, and you look at the continents and the pieces, you can see how they would fit together as one initially, which I would argue is exactly what Moses is describing here, even though he shouldn't have known about that 3,500 years ago. And then, I don't have time, because I'm out of time already, but you see God bringing forth initially simple vegetation, probably single cell, and then greater vegetation, grass, and eventually seed-bearing plants. Then he talks about, after that, the refining of the rotation of the earth and the sun and the moon to create these 24-hour periods, which, by the way, disproves the 24-hour day theory in my mind. Pardon me to those of you that are literal day, 24-hour day people. But if God didn't put the earth and the sun and the moon into proper rotation until day 4, what were the first 3 days? They couldn't have been 24-hour days with sunsets and sunrises because that hadn't happened yet. But he solidifies the 24-hour rotation. Then he goes on to talk about, on the 5th day, that there would be all these creatures in the water and also birds. And actually the original King James in the Hebrew suggests that there were sea monsters, or great creatures of the sea. Some scholars believe he's referring to dinosaurs in that context. And it's interesting how just in the latter part of the 20th century, science began to believe that dinosaurs were not actually giant reptiles or lizards, which is what the word means, dinosaur, great lizard, but rather they were more closely related to birds. Isn't it interesting that on day 5, birds and these giant sea monsters and all sea life comes into play at the same time? And then last but not least, and again there's so much more here, I'm just skipping over stuff, man comes along on day 6 after all the mammals are put in place. And it's interesting how when we look in, forget about evolution, I do not believe in macroevolution. I think micro, where species are designed by God to change, just like Darwin saw the birds on Galapagos Islands, he knew they had the ability to adapt to their environment, but the birds didn't become something else, and lizards didn't become birds. They were still birds, they just adapted, and new species were born out of their adaptation. But macroevolution, where you got one species becoming another, Genesis is clear that each one produced after its kind, but not across kinds. And they happened in this order. Well, the order that Moses reveals is the exact order science believes to have discovered in the fossil record. Mammals coming last, man being the last of all, right? And right back to the very beginning. How did Moses know that? He hadn't seen an evolutionary chart. He hadn't read Darwin. And again, I'm not suggesting that species crossed over into other species. That's macroevolution. I don't believe in it. But how did he know the order in which a species would appear? And how did he know that they could never cross species? They could only be expanded or adapt within their kind, as he puts it. How did he know that? That's what the fossil record proves. Darwin said this. He said, if the fossil record does not contain millions of examples of trans-species mutation, my theory should be discarded. Well, the fossil record contains exactly no record of trans-species mutation. Apes becoming man or lizards becoming birds, or any of those things. And if you think it does, go back and check your old textbooks, because the ones we were shown in high school, supposedly with Archaeopteryx, for example, showing us a lizard bird, have been discarded as two fossils mushed together. They are no longer appearing in textbooks because science knows, no, that's not true. And they may believe it happened, but they don't have proof of it. So how did Moses know all that stuff and get it right? I mean, you could say one or two things, maybe it was just a lucky guess. But that list I just gave you, plus more, no way to know it apart from divine intervention, inspiration of God and the Holy Spirit. You don't need to be ashamed of your Bible. You don't need to hide in the corner and say, well, I just chose it because, it's true for me. It's true for me. Woohoo! You don't have to be nasty about it, but you don't need to cower in ignorance or fear, because God's Word is truth. All right, I got to go. That's it. Good morning, Roger. Good morning, Richie. Hey, thanks to all of you for joining us. Tell your friends, neighbors, and complete strangers, please, about Pondering every weekday morning at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. We'd love to hear from you here on our Facebook page. You can type in comments 24/7, 365. You can call 860-500-7163 or email ponderingradio@gmail.com. Love you guys. Hey, have a great day. Stay in the Word. Keep praying. Don't check that brain at the door. Keep on pondering. Bye for now.